as he taught, he said, "Beware of the scribes, who like to walk around in long robes and to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces, to have the best seats in the synagogues and places of honor at banquets. They devour widows' houses and for the sake of appearance say long prayers. They will receive the greater condemnation." He sat opposite the treasury and watched the crowd putting money into the treasury. Many rich people put in large sums. A poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which are worth a penny. Then he called his disciples and said to them, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the treasury. For all of them have contributed out of their abundance, but she out of her poverty has put in everything she had, all that she had to live on." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So I don't know if you ever heard of the speaker Tony Campolo. It was Tony was a professor at the Eastern Baptist College, and he was a teacher in sociology. And he used to speak all around the country. He was a very provocative, very good speaker, and he used to speak at a lot of college campuses and high schools and churches. I think he spoke about 250 times a year. So he was pretty much always on the road. And he said that when he was sitting on an airplane, he'd always get the question, "So what do you do for a living?" And he said that if he was in a mood to talk, he would say, "I'm a professor of sociology." And he said if he wasn't in the mood to talk, he would say, "I'm a Baptist evangelist." And he had peace and quiet the whole trip. That's it. I'm not sure why people get a little nervous when they're greeted by someone who says that they're a pastor. Maybe they're afraid they're going to be, he's going to try to convert them, he or she going to try to convert them, or maybe worse, going to hit them up for a donation. The old joke when you meet a pastor, shake hands with your right hand and hold on to your wallet with your left. Well, preaching and speaking and talking about money, it's not easy. Especially in light of the fact that people have this idea that the church is mainly interested in your money. And so that's always somewhat difficult to overcome. But giving, is more than about the church. Giving is about being human. And I think that's a little bit about what our text is about today. So, in a former life, I used to take groups of students to Israel. I studied there for a brief period of time in the 80s, and so it was had such an impact on my life that I decided that, this would be a good thing to do, to take students there and to learn about the land, and something about being there takes the Bible and makes it three-dimensional. It has a big impact, those of you who have ever gone. Well, 2 bodies of water that are a part of the landscape in Israel are the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee. The Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee are 2 bodies of water that are very close to each other. One is in the north, in the region of the Galilee, and it is a freshwater lake. And the other is in the south, and it's not a freshwater lake. The one in the north, they're both in this what they call the Great Rift Valley. It's the largest fault line in the world. It runs from Lebanon all the way down into Africa, and bodies of water are part of it. The Red Sea is part of that fault line, and so is the Sea of Galilee, and so is the Dead Sea. The Sea of Galilee is about 650 feet below sea level, and the Dead Sea is the lowest place on the face of the earth, 1,350 feet below sea level. At the Sea of Galilee, and in the Sea of Galilee, it's a beautiful freshwater lake. It's got a lot of fish, all sorts of varieties of fish. It's clear, and they've got their farms around the outside. Their homes built, and there's recreation. The only place I've ever parasailed was over the Sea of Galilee. I felt like Jesus flying earlier. Yeah. So the sea's just a beautiful. The Dead Sea, those of you who've been there, very different. Nothing lives. The Sea of Galilee. It's dark. A few microbes, they say. Dark, murky. Our students love to go swimming in the Sea of Galilee. You don't really swim in the Sea of Galilee. You kind of bob in it, like a cork. And they say you can sit in it and read a newspaper and not have the newspaper get wet. You've seen pictures of that. 34% salt. Just by comparison, our oceans have about 4% salt. Very dense body of water. Same geologic climate, environment, same water running. Same water coming out of Mount Hermon area fills them both. Everything's the same about the two lakes, about the two seas, except one thing, and you probably know what it is if you ever studied it or been there. The Sea of Galilee has an outlet, right? The Jordan River runs into the Sea of Galilee in the north, and it runs out in the south. The Dead Sea, however, doesn't. So all that happens in the Dead Sea is water comes in, evaporates, and leaves this goopy, gooey, murky substance that you sort of bob in, like I said, like a cork. We're talking about giving. Giving is something we do as human beings. We share our lives. There's something important about taking in and giving out. Keeps us fresh. Keeps us alive. Everything coming in and nothing going out. We become murky, lifeless, even shallow. In our text this morning, we see Mark actually putting two different topics together. First of all, he talks to the disciples about the scribes. He says the scribes, they use their authority to act more important than others. They like to walk around in long robes, to be called doctor and reverend, to be honored at banquets, recite long prayers, and get discounts at the movie theater. And they like being noticed. And Jesus says, beware of them. They've lost their way. And then he's sitting there at the temple watching people putting in money. And he notices a similar problem. He says they're using their giving as a way to demonstrate their superiority or their prominence or their importance. They're waiting till everyone is looking and they drop all their coins in and make clink, 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 clink in the offering bowl. And then he's sitting there and he's watching this happen. And the action of the text begins when a poor widow finds her way to the offering bowls that were located outside in front of the temple. And I can imagine Jesus was sort of watching her from a distance over in the corner. Slowly, after all the others had made their donations, she kind of sees an opening and walks up to the front. Maybe a little embarrassed, possibly, that she has so little to give, but maybe also very excited. And she puts in her penny. And so Jesus he's amazed, obviously. He calls the disciples over. They were probably, the disciples, I don't know where they were. Maybe they were caught up trying to get an invitation to the after party that was going on maybe for the larger donors. Or maybe an autograph from one of the important scribes. And he begins to tell them about this woman. He says, I'm going to tell you what I just saw. This woman who has nothing walked up to the offering bowl and put in the penny. And let me tell you the truth. Let me tell you the truth, he says to his disciples. She put in more than all the rest. Her penny was more than all the rest. I'm sure they thought he was crazy. And then he says, let me tell you something about giving that you may not realize. The reason it was more isn't because it was, the amount was more. Clearly it was not. He says this, they gave out of their abundance, but she gave out of her poverty. So all week I've been pondering this phrase. What does this mean? To give out of abundance versus give out of poverty. I know how it was used in my life in the past. Usually made me feel guilty. And I thought, well, it just doesn't sound like Jesus to be, hammering people over the head about giving. So what is this giving out of abundance versus giving out of poverty? I should have written to you this week and had you just sort of see what you could come up with, what you thought it was about. What if poverty or abundance wasn't a condition of their bank account? What if it wasn't a condition of how many zeros they had behind their numbers in their bank account? What if poverty and abundance had something to do with the condition of their hearts? Now that sounds a little more like Jesus to me. What if giving out of abundance would be giving out of a feeling of superiority and privilege? I am bestowing upon you my abundance. What if giving out of an abundance is giving out of our sense of accomplishment? I'm so accomplished. I'm so successful. Let me show you. Let me show you by giving you a little morsel or a little something. What if giving out of poverty would be giving out of our own sense of need? What if giving out of our poverty is giving out of our own sense of brokenness? Our own sense of needing grace and love and kindness. What if we're not giving? What if giving is more about how we're giving versus how much we're giving? What if what it means to give out of poverty means to give out of a shared sense of being needing to be given to? What if we weren't afraid of our own sense of poverty? Maybe giving begins to lose its freshness. Maybe it loses its freshness or its life-giving quality when we give out of a sense of being just a cut above others. Maybe that's what the warning's about. I'm just a little more skillful. A little smarter. And we give out of that position of hierarchy versus solidarity. When Jesus says, blessed are the poor, he's saying, blessed are those who are in touch with their own weakness, who are in touch with their own needs, their own pain, their own brokenness. Blessed are those who are not leaning on their own power or their own abundance or their abilities, but instead are leaning on grace and life as gift, not life as reward. Freshwater giving is giving out of gratitude for the undeserved and unmerited and unearned favor and blessing. We give as fellow sufferers, don't we? We give as those who also need. We give as those who are also poor. We give as those who also need to be given to. The biggest problem with our our country, I think, is that sometimes wealth makes us feel like we're better than others. Just like the biggest problem with being a pastor or a leader or a teacher is that it makes some people feel holier than others, or smarter than others, or more privileged than others, or closer to God than others. When our lives are being lived from a position of superiority, our freshness begins to dry up. This isn't condemnation that Jesus is sharing. This is just good news. This is good news. We don't have to pretend to be better. When we believe it's in our abundance or holiness or talent or intellect or our degrees or our influence or our bank accounts that make us valuable or worthwhile or respected or needed, then the waters begin to lose their life-giving power, life-nourishing ability. We look like water until you wade in and you find out that you actually feel like you're wading into some half solidified jello. You know, it's not really water. Stagnant. And no matter how many greetings we receive in the marketplace, how many long prayers we recite, how many best seats in the banquets, we just can't help but feeling like we need just a little more. Just a little more. We are dependent on just a little more coming in, a little more attention, a little more honor, a little more money, a little more respect. It's never enough. It will never be enough. When we embrace our brokenness, when we embrace our suffering or pain or poverty, we can lean on something other than our abundance. We can lean on something other than our success. We can look at ourselves honestly, realizing that we're just human, like everybody else. Needy, broken, suffering at times. And we can lean on life-giving grace, love, mercy, kindness, and forgiveness. We can feel full from love, not from our success. We can feel full. And out of that fullness can flow rivers of living water, Jesus said. When we give to make ourselves feel better or more important, when we do ministry in order to feel important or more honored, we become like a plant living in its own pot. Fresh water means we are giving out of gratitude for God's unconditional mercy toward a broken person like me. Several years ago, on one of our trips to Honduras, we were out in a village outside of San Pedro Sula, and we brought bags of beans and rice and cornmeal. We asked people, what do they need most? And they need food. And so we would go to the store and we'd buy these big 50-pound bags of beans or rice, and we'd take them to the doors. And I remember the first time we did that. This then happened repeatedly after this. But when we went first into we were taking them to single moms and to their children. And we took them into the house, and they were very thankful. And as soon as it happened, the woman began to open up the bag and start spooning out portions into other containers. And she looked at us and asked if it would be okay to take some of this to her neighbor across the street and to the other neighbor on the other block. Would we mind? And, I think if anybody had what I would consider the right to store it in her own cupboard, it would have been her. But so often, what you realize is in that condition, they needed each other. The community needed each other. Abundance says we don't need anyone. Poverty says we need each other. And poverty says, because of that, we share with each other. And our giving to stay fresh, to stay alive, to stay full, is when we give out of our poverty, not out of our abundance. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.